All right. Good morning, everyone. Yate abene. Thank you again for your patience as we were just waiting for a couple people, more people to join. We're excited to welcome you to today's featured presentation, part of the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity's quarterly webinar series. We're very fortunate to be granted funding from the American Cancer Society, and the recording will be available on the NAU Share YouTube channel uh, after the webinar takes place. Um, so before we go ahead and get into that, actually, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Hudson, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. I serve as the Senior Community Program Coordinator at C-NACHE, and I'm a proud citizen of the Navajo Nation. I'd like to briefly share my plans to establish any kinship relationships I might have in the room. I am of the Mountain Cove clan, born for the Black-Streeted Wooded people. My maternal grandfathers are of the Towering House clan, and my maternal grandfathers are of the Water's Edge clan. Um, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Chastity Begay, who will be co-facilitating this session through the webinar chat. So I'll turn it over to Chastity for a brief introduction.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name's Chastity Begay. I'm a research coordinator for the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity, and I am of the Coyote Pass people born for the Big Water people. My maternal grandfather is of the Towering House clan, and my paternal grandfather is of the Bitterwater clan. So nice to see any relatives I have in the room. And just like Jen said, I will just be looking at the Zoom chats. So feel free to put any questions in there, or if you have anything, I'll be in that.
Great. Thanks so much, Chas. So for today's webinar, Legacy Mining and Kidney Cancer, Environmental Exposures as a Social Determinant of Health, we are so honored to be joined by our featured speaker, Tasha Nez, who is a research coordinator with the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity at Northern Arizona University. And she'll have a few moments in a bit just to introduce herself more fully, but we're really excited to have Tasha here today. Um, a quick note, as I said, today's session will be recorded and available on the NAU Share YouTube channel. So look forward to that recording when it's available. All right, moving forward, as always, we'd like to take a moment to just set our collective intentions for this webinar series. We recognize that for many Native American and Indigenous communities, cancer is a culturally sensitive and sometimes spiritually prohibitive topic. Our goal at C-NACHE is to approach this subject with respect, cultural awareness, and care, honoring the deep spiritual traditions that guide many Indigenous models of health and wellness. And so at this time, we'd like to invite you to reflect quietly in your own way on your intentions for being here at the webinar today. You may use this moment for personal prayer or setting a protective intention for yourself as we just enter this dialogue. So I'll just take some time now. About 45 seconds or so, just to set our own collective intentions for that. So, all right. Thank you so much for participating in that with us. Um, so that brings us here to the intention of the webinar series. Or a little bit here about us here at Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity at NAU. We're based in Flagstaff, Arizona. Um, at the base of Dolxclede, as we say in Navajo, or San Francisco Peaks, as it's colonially known. Um, and I had a land acknowledgement here in my thing, and I cannot find it. Chas, can you provide that for me here? I had my script all ready to go with it, and
Yeah, I can say it.
okay, thank you so much for
Yeah,
us, just
so
so we can start it off that way as well.
yeah. So Northern Arizona sits at the base of the San Francisco Peaks on homeland sacred to Native Americans throughout the region, and we honor their past, present, and future generations who have lived here for a millennia and will forever call this place home.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chas. And that is where, as I said, the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity, or C-NACHE, as we refer to it as, is based. It was established in December of 2022 with an award from the American Cancer Society to NAU. And the goal of the center is to reduce the unequal burden of cancer and advance cancer health equity for Native Americans, with a focus on cancer screening rates, access to cancer care services, and exposure to cancer-causing environmental contaminants in Native American communities, which is the focus of today's webinar topic. So if you'd like more information, we have a QR code there you can scan to be connected with all things C-NACHE, and I believe Chas is going to provide a link in the chat for that as well. So this brings us to the purpose of the webinar series. Our target audience really includes Native American and college and university students, though all are welcome, especially community members. This series seeks to spotlight the many forms of cancer research happening across Turtle Island, with a focus particularly on the Four Corners region. So when many of us hear cancer research, we often think of lab-based sciences, lab coats, and maybe some beakers. But in reality, cancer research spans many disciplines, public health, environmental science, behavioral science, policy, and more. So this series highlights the different pathways available with the goal of inspiring the next generation of Native researchers and advocates. So with that said, now thrilled to turn it over to Tasha Nez for her presentation on legacy mining and kidney cancer. So Tosh, I will turn it over to you now to take it away.
Yeah, David, I am Tasha Nez. Ashin Nishla do Tchana Bashichin, Kintlachini Dashiche do not Altana Tachin Dashanella. And I'm honored and excited to be here to share our study, legacy mining and kidney cancer, environmental exposures as a social determinant of health. Next slide. So, my contents, I'll be talking about my information, my journey, a study background, cancer among Navajo, and then from there we'll lead into the social determinants of health. Kidney cancer, we'll specifically focus again on Navajo population, and then we'll talk about the environmental exposures from legacy mining, and finally the next steps for the study and my reflections. Next slide. So as mentioned, I am a Diné researcher at the NAU Center for Community Health and Engaged Research. My clans are the Salt people born from near the water. And I was raised by my grandmother on the Black Mesa. I learned the Nepizad, the Navajo language. That was my first language. And I grew up in a traditional home. So as a young girl, my first memories include participating in Hujonja, Blessing Way, and Nayeja protection ceremonies. And I had lots of elders throughout the course of my life that mentored me. So my worldview is founded in the ways of knowing. On Black Mesa, we had a mine company since the 70s, and since then we had a lot of environmental impacts, especially with health. So my family, specifically my mom, had suffered from some illnesses, so we had to navigate through that, and we found out exactly why it was happening. So from there, we had to, change a lot of things in our life, which basically led to us healing, and my mom got well. And so because of that, it became kind of like a personal issue that I decided to take on, just knowing that I seen so much people that were dealing with this. And these pictures are of my grandmother, the first two. This home right here is where I grew up. The first picture, there's no electricity and there's no water. And we just had sheep for a meat source and raising corn and crops. And then to the right, like I mentioned, the Peabody Coal Company was on Black Mesa for since the 1970s, and they pretty much had a lot of impacts to the water. So we ran out of water and we couldn't produce crops anymore. So I had to find a job, and this is where my journey really began. In 2016, with Shemaya Jin, the coal horse herder, and Shiaj Marshall Johnson, we journeyed to St. Louis, and that's where we protested the bankruptcy of Chapter 11 that they filed. And 3 years after that, the Navajo generating station closed, which was the only customer to Peabody. So that's where it ended. The coal era ended. Next slide. So this is just a short visual of my journey. I worked for many years for the Navajo Nation at the chapter level. So from there, I decided to do something that was more helpful to my community. So I went back to Diné College, where my journey really started in 2012, and I did several projects there, including developing an air quality for the Navajo Nation. Then after graduating, I worked for about a year at the Navajo Department of Health as a research assistant again. And similar things, I noticed that there weren't that many Navajo speaking researchers or even Navajo researchers. So that kind of like motivated me to keep going. So I went to NAU in 2016, and that's where I really became involved in Dr. Jenny Ingram's lab as being part of the Native American Cancer Prevention program for scholars. So I got my bachelor's in environmental science and then a graduate degree in environmental science and policy that was funded by a prestigious fellowship, which is the RISE Fellowship. And since then, I've been working on a few projects here and there, including the Navajo Healthy Stomach Project and now the Legacy Mining and Kidney Cancer. Next slide. So just another timeline showing back in 2018 when I completed my capstone at the NIH. The title of my study is pretty long, but you can see it on there. So pretty much identifying genetic variants that influence the body weight. And then in 2020, I completed my thesis, the Navajo Mutton Consumption Survey in 2020, and then that's where my research journey really began. Next slide. Here are just some photos from the field work that I've done. The upper right or the upper left photo is a uranium waste rock that we found in one of the study sites where we're sampling. And this is one of the main reasons why that the study is happening. So this ore fell out of a portal and it went into a small riverbed. So it ended up close to a community where animals were grazing. And then just some lab work in the Ingram lab. And then to the left on the bottom is when I worked at the Asarco mine for the undergraduate research consortium at U of A. So this is where a lot of my mine training came from. So dealing with like soil contamination and how vegetation affects that. And then to the left, the Navajo Healthy Stomach Project when we were doing surveys in Winter Rock. And next slide. So the background of Navajo abandoned uranium mines goes back to the geologic formations where uranium and arsenic are naturally occurring in the southwestern portion of the United States. And this is in the Four Corners region shown to the right on the map. So the Four Corners region, then to the left of it in the green circle is the Western Agency, where 30 million tons of ore were mined. And specifically in this region, open pit mines were used between 1950s and 60s in the Western region. So uranium is a toxic heavy metal, and ingestion is the most common path of exposure. So it's not really the radioactivity that we're concerned about in uranium. It's mostly the toxic heavy metal because it can accumulate in the body. Um, radioactivity can also increase risk for cancer if you're living near like a waste pile or an abandoned mine. And arsenic, it's not a heavy metal, it's a metalloid, so it does have metal and non-metal forms. And then being exposed to arsenic can lead high risk of cancer or diabetes. So currently there are over 500 mines still in the Navajo Nation that are not cleaned up. Next slide. On the background of the policy efforts, I'm showing four on here. So the most, I guess I would say that the most prominent one is the landmark that the Navajo Nation law, which bans the all uranium mining and processing within the Navajo Nation, which is the Natural Resources Protection Act of 2005. And then we also have the Radioactive Materials Transportation Act. These are on the public transportations to prevent uranium from being hauled on those public roads. And we also formed a Diné Uranium Remediation Advisory Commission since 2018. And I would like to highlight the newly expanded RECA, which is the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act of 2012. But since it's been renewed, it's now extended all the way into December 31st of, I think it was 2027. But this provides a one-time compensation to victims to help, with different burdens that they're facing after treatment and stuff like that. So we'll be covering a lot of kidney cancers in this study because and also because the RECA also added new provisions for kidney diseases. So this is one of the most meaningful steps that I would like to highlight. And we still also need long-term extensions, including illnesses as they become known. Next slide. The human exposure paths, like I mentioned, are inhalation, which is the most common, and also ingestion. So you can ingest it through anything like water, soil, or foods that have uranium contaminations on them. And one of the most common pathways of exposure on the Navajo Nation is drinking from an unregulated water source. So here I have a photo of an unregulated water source in Cove. So usually when thermal contact happens, it's usually through an open lesion, and that's where it can accumulate in your body as well. And there are also radioactive properties that you can be exposed to inside or in your from uranium piles if they're near your home. So it's really important that these get cleaned up. And next slide. The health effects of uranium exposure are really caused by ingestion. So the primary risk, like I mentioned, is chemical toxicity from uranium rather than the radioactivity exposure. So uranium has the potential to accumulate in the body, and that is a serious threat to the kidneys as it is a primary contact for uranium. Listed for further are more health effects of exposure, and uranium exposure can affect respiratory system, liver, and it can also affect your bone health. Alpha radiation can also cause cellular damage, and it's important for children to be monitored or kept away from these kind of sites to reduce their exposure. Next slide. Um, this slide shows the most common diagnosed cancers among Navajo people. And you can see here that the red arrow pointing to the kidney cancer on this first one shows that the kidney cancer incidence is a lot higher in Navajo people compared to the non-Hispanic white population. And that's goes the same for stomach cancer, also shown by the red arrow, and then liver and myeloma. Next slide. This also shows the most commonly diagnosed cancers among Navajo from 2005 to 13. Also shows that the female breast cancer, colorectal, prostate, and kidney are the most commonly diagnosed cancers in that time frame from 2005 to 2013. And this is taken from the three registries from Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Next slide. Here again, I have the most commonly diagnosed cancers among Navajo people compared to non-Hispanic whites, and I would really like to highlight that cancer incidence rates are way higher in the Navajo population compared to non-Hispanic white. And you can see that the rate is, I think, 26 per 100,000 compared to the non-Hispanic population, which is 14 people diagnosed with kidney cancer out of 100,000. And kidney cancer is usually diagnosed at a later stage for Navajo people, which causes them to have an increased risk for mortality rates. Next slide. Mortality rates among the Navajo people um, are also pretty high for those top four that I mentioned, colorectal, stomach, pancreas, and female breast cancer. Kidney cancer is also on there, but it's not that significant compared to the colorectal cancer. Next slide. Here I have the age-adjusted cancer mortality rates for the Navajo people in the area. So you can see that the cancer sites are listed on the bottom on the x-axis, and then the cases again. So here we show stomach cancer, liver cancer, kidney cancer, and gallbladder, showing to be much higher than cancer incidence compared to the pop non-Hispanic population. Uh, Next slide. Here, I'd like to talk about the social determinants of health, which are important contributors. Um, so this figure shows that there are non-medical conditions in the environments where people are born, where they grow, work, and play, and the ages which affect wide ranges of health and quality of life outcomes. Environmental exposures are a social determinant of health, not only because of the environmental contamination, but are also completely intertwined with social structures and inequalities in power distribution. The Navajo Nation is vulnerable due to having already pre-existing health conditions, and 30% of the households don't have access to indoor plumbing or regulated water, which can cause a lot of stress and increase exposures. And also, the Navajo Nation is a food desert, so only with 13 full service grocery stores creates barriers to nutrition. And then the IHS is also one of the main determinants of health, historically being underfunded per capita per spending for Navajo people, which is less than half of the per capita spending for entitlement programs like Medicaid, which are usually covering mostly almost everything that people need to get help with their health. It's not the same for IHS because not all services are covered, and usually um, the programs are not easily accessible, and usually technology and devices are sometimes outdated. Next slide. And here I'm getting really into my study. So our hypothesis is that Navajo people living in the Western Agency of the Navajo Nation have increased access or increased risk of kidney cancer due to environmental exposures from legacy mining. We have three aims, and the three aims are mostly about collaborating with our partners, which are the Tuba City Regional Healthcare Corporation and the Navajo communities in the Western Agency, the 18 chapters. And our aim three is to collaborate with the Tuba City Healthcare to provide the best recommendations for health providers. And this information will come from the environmental health survey that I'm doing. Next slide. Again, I like to mention that kidney cancer is way higher for um, Navajo people compared to the non-Hispanic white people. Showing again right here, you can see that the Navajo people almost have twice as much incidence rates as the non-Hispanic white in the same area. Next slide. So with our project background, the Ingram Lab has done numerous environmental research studies, including water, soil, plants, dust, and most of it was around uranium and arsenic. So that's the reason why that this study was implemented. Building relationships with Navajo communities is also one of the main priorities for the Ingram Lab. And since they work directly with the Navajo Nation, a lot of their requests come from chapter resolutions that are approved by the Navajo people themselves. And the human research is also um, pretty much reliant on the IRB for Navajo Nation. So the studies that I'm talking about were approved by the Navajo Nation IRB. And because we already have established partnerships with the Tuba City, we're also doing collaborations with the workers and looking into medical record reviews for and looking at cancer incidence rates. So as of last year in July, both of the IRB approvals are completed, and that's where the study really takes off. Next slide. Here I have photos of our team. So Justin Wilbanks, he's doing water sampling, and then Eleanor Fierce on the upper right. She also did some sampling, soil sampling and water in the Western Agency, and then picture of me to the bottom right doing surveys in the at the Winter Rock Flea Market. It was pretty windy that way, so I usually have a canopy and chairs, but because I didn't want them to fly away, I just took them down. But usually that's what it looks like when I'm out doing surveys. Next slide. So the research progress so far about 50 water samples were collected from the 50 wells in the Western Agency. And so far, the US EPA still has not set a maximum contaminant level for the rare earth elements. And concentrations for uranium and arsenic for the well water are shown in the figure that I'll be showing next. I apologize, but it didn't show up for some reason on the slide. Next slide. And since the studies are completed and the samples were collected, we reported the results back to Coal Mine Canyon. Um, The table shows all the 13 wells in the Coal Mine Canyon area with all their names next to them. And uranium and arsenic levels are shown right next to the well names. And at the end, in that last column, you can see if the wells are safe for drinking, as dependent on the results of the uranium and arsenic levels. And the maximum contaminant level for US EPA is 30 parts per billion, and arsenic maximum contaminant level is 10 parts per billion for water. And the map shows all 13 sites in the white numbers, and you can see the locations on the map. Oh, I forgot to mention that Coal Mine Canyon is going towards east of the Cameron chapter, so not too far, so it's a bit close to the area. And next slide. This report contains data on levels of uranium levels of the uranium and arsenic that were sampled from Copper Mine Canyon or Copper Mine chapter. So the water was collected on December 16th, and again, MCLs are set by the US and the Navajo EPA. And these contaminant levels must be below MCL for water to be safe to drink. And the levels of contamination are reported in parts per billion. So this table shows the site IDs again on the right or the left, and then the well names, the uranium levels, the arsenic levels, and if the water is safe to drink. So this map of Copper Mine chapter is shown to the right. The blue star is the chapter location, and then the black dots are the well sites. And the good news is that all these values are below the maximum contaminant level, which means that they are all safe to drink. Next slide. Um, these are soil sample results from the Cameron abandoned uranium mine that's located right close to the chapter house, as you can see on the map. Um, the There's like a waste pile, 5 of them, directly behind the Cameron chapter house with only a few signs. And the results are showing that the prediction surfaces, so they took soil and dust samples from the top of those waste piles. The surfaces were sampled for arsenic and uranium concentration by the Ingram lab. And Eleanor Fear took these samples for her thesis in May 2005, and she produced these maps. So these waste piles are numbered and symbolized by the white polygons that you can see on the map up here. There are 5 piles, so you can see the white numbers. So number 1, close to the orange area to the bottom left or right. And then kind of towards the center, you can see the number 2 site. It's a little bit more elevated compared to 2, 3, and 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this mine was abandoned in 1955. Waste piles, 1 and 2, both appear to have high levels of uranium and arsenic, as shown by the orange polygons, and those are between 14 and 100 parts per million. People live close to the waste piles, like even as close as 300 feet away. And the EPA defines these boundaries. Um, are as homes and they're closer, like I mentioned, and these piles are not well vegetated, so they don't mitigate the aeolian or the water transport of uranium and arsenic contaminated dust to people's homes and near their homes. And also, the Colorado River is nearby, so that's also being exposed to uranium and arsenic contamination. So these suggest that people living to these sites are exposed to higher concentrations of uranium and arsenic. Next slide. So my community, my health survey is pretty much um, acquired through um, a protocol that I developed using F. So I usually introduce myself with my clients first before I start taking surveys. And I wanted to mention that because I think it's very, very unique that I don't really see many people out there speaking Navajo and using to establish connections or set intentions. So as I mentioned, back in July, we got approval letter from the Navajo Human Research Board. And since then, I've been working with a biostats consultant. So we were able to determine a sample size specifically that reflects only the Western agency population, not the entire Navajo Nation. So these were calculated by a biostats, Zara M, and she pretty much is helping with the analysis as well. And so far, I have completed 155 environmental health surveys, and then I pretty much only have two more studies samplings to go. And I started off, like I mentioned, using the so yate, yate shema or yate shiche. People usually respond to che better than shema. I don't know why, but I think it's because, they feel special being called che. So usually, when they come over, I talk to them, I shake their hand, and we talk about the study, the background, and usually they'll consent. I haven't really gotten no response. Um, and since the paper forms are always available, it's more reliable. It takes only 10 minutes to complete, and we have a $10 gift card for the incentive. So there are 2 parts to the survey study. The first part, like I mentioned, is in doing it in the Western agency and sampling from Navajo adults over 18 years of age living in the area. As for the second part of the survey, the Tuba City healthcare workers will also be surveyed using a Qualtrics, which is completed online, and also the same, there will be a $10 gift card incentive. So both of the results from both surveys will be compared, and that way we can understand what they know and what they don't know. So that way we can inform later on after the study is completed the grand rounds with the Tuba City so that we can figure out how to address these environmental exposures before they become more advanced. And three of the dates that I sampled were mostly in Tuba City, being that that's the most highly densely populated place. And then the rest are in Loop, Cameron, Coppermine, Shanto Kayenta, and I think it was Inscription House. Next slide. So here's what the survey looks like. I have 13 questions on there. We talk about their tribal affiliation and they indicate which location that they're coming from. And then just a few demographics. They disclose their age and their identity. Then finally, the questions. So they're asking, do you or anyone you know in Western agency have a chronic health condition? And then they circle and they can write what kind of health conditions that they have experienced. And then usually the condition, um, the length of the condition, how long it affected that person's life. And then they can also explain in their own words what is a harmful environmental exposure. And this is to get a baseline understanding of what the community member knows or don't know. And there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just pretty much gathering baseline data. Same with the other questions, being aware of harmful materials in your community. And if you know where they're at, you can circle them. And then we're also asking if they use any prevention exposures to reduce their exposure to these harmful materials, especially the uranium. And same with the question 8. If you answer yes to the question previously, you can indicate the prevention measures there. So usually people will be like, oh, I grow squashes in my backyard and I like to rinse them off before I eat them because there could be uranium inside the soil and we don't know about it. So then we talk about perceptions, believing if the materials could be affecting their health. At the end, we ask if they want to know more, and that's where they indicate how they would like to be contacted. Usually, people prefer email now. It seems more popular to hear email than to get a phone call or a mail, a flyer. The next slide. As I mentioned previously, the Navajo worldview can be considered traditional ecological knowledge because how the Navajo people are connected with their land and how they perceive balance emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So Navajo people worldview shows or um, indicates that people who are not in balance with the environment um, can increase their risk of acquiring diseases or sicknesses. And this is just through oral, stories. Lots of observations have happened throughout, you know, their history, and most of it is not documented. So that's the reason why it gets challenged a lot by Western science. So, and because of the observations have always proven and valid, it's really important to consider that these are, considered into these policies, especially holistically, how the entire body and the environment are connected and how it plays a role in their health. So going back to the previous slides for efforts, the three policies that I mentioned all have the TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, and Navajo ways of knowing incorporated into the policy itself. And these were implemented by Navajo policymakers and other leaders that are also using that framework. So learning by observation, lots of our stories, including our creation stories, are based upon that. And because there are no hard evidences, but only oral evidences show that there is human exposure and genetic effects can also be linked. And we have specific stories about that. So if you want to look into it, there are a lot of resources that you can find at Diné College or through the library. And because of this, it's already showing that it's been incorporated but not to a larger scale. So because of it's only four things that I've mentioned, there needs to be more policies that are established that align with these knowledges and these ways of knowing, so that the Navajo people can continue practicing traditions while reducing exposures. So sometimes some people that have told me that, oh, Navajo ceremonies um are not part of healing, and, as mentioned by, like Western medicine, because herbs could actually be increasing something else or making things worse. So things like that. But because so much evidence has been shown and they experienced it, I believe that the TDK should be, and continue to be incorporated, but on much larger scale. And this paper by Dr. Tommy Rock shows that there are already policy considerations for abandoned uranium mine cleanups on the Navajo Nation. So one thing I like to say is keep plate soil in the ground. That's where it was meant to be, and we shouldn't be disturbing it because that's where all the imbalance is coming from. Next slide. I took this photo when I was an undergrad. It's it's really powerful to me when I see it. So that's the reason why I'm showing it. And environmental justice issues often involve minority or socioeconomically burdened communities suffering from contamination. So in our case, we have the 500 abandoned scattered mines that have not been cleaned up as of today. And these issues disproportionately affect everyone in our community, especially with the health disparities that we talked about. And we deserve fair treatment and respect, and we must be provided the opportunity by the federal government to address issues which they are facing with our own lived experiences and our own traditional ecological knowledge. So that provides culturally appropriate foundation for addressing complex relationships between nature and humans. And historically, there have been policies that were developed by non-native stakeholders that has always been shown to have long-term negative effects on communities. So rather than benefiting the nations, the one-sided policies often harm us. So this is the reason why it is a culturally appropriate approach that can rebuild trust to initiate cleanup and healing. The next slide. Here are just some ways that you can become proactive in advancing environmental justice. So there are so many ways that you can become involved. It doesn't have to be lab science again, or you don't have to, be actively doing science in the community. You could actually, just attend a chapter meeting and vote on a resolution for a study, or, or for policy development. Ownership too is very important. This is where I was talking about. I didn't see that many people that were Navajo speaking or Navajo heritage when I was working in the Navajo Department of Health, and same with Diné College. So here I like to just highlight that it's very important that we take control and we start owning our processes of developing environmental policy. The laws are already integrated into policies, and which I've shown you. So with that, I would just like to really just emphasize no new mining on Navajo Nation. This is where most of the justice will start, besides the cleanup issues and the proper cleanup issues, not just getting a shovel and in a bucket and putting things in there, but actually cleaning it and putting them somewhere where they can, be covered, and for long-term generations too, because, we live in the Southwest, so lots of erosion and dry climate. So, with these, I believe that these will improve our healthcare programs too, especially with the screening rates. And one thing I like to talk about is, demanding, like the way I had that the slide with, the St. Louis protests. Usually, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission they have also admitted that there's no way that a company can return an aquifer back to pre-injection or pre-mining levels. And they also stated that they will accept the standard by the Safe Drinking Water Act, which allows for up to 30 parts per billion of uranium to be in a liter of water. So this basically means that, yes, we can still have uranium in water, but just, we're going to monitor it and not keep it above 30. So things like that. And because of that, I think it's very important to keep uranium in the ground and no more new mining. Um, I read a statement by a former miner and person that lives in Church Rock, Larry King. So he mentioned the same thing too. He doesn't know of any environmental issues that have been addressed with cleaning yet, except for the Northeast Church Rock mine. And so water is really important. And because water is life, I truly believe that uranium plates should be kept in the ground. And this is also the only way that groundwater will remain protected for long-term generations. In the next slide. So Amber Crotty, our honorable delegate, quoted, "I seek to restore balance, harmony, and transparency on the Navajo Nation." That's what environmental justice is about. It's about being fair and respectful to the Native communities, and so that they can restore their land and their future, or for the water for the future, and to address this ongoing harm caused by, the abandoned uranium mines and how they contribute to disparities. And, you can also become active in environmentalism. So, becoming part of a environmental group, or just even reading about it, or recognizing a worldview of Navajo is also one way that you can participate. And other ways too, there's so many ways. And I just wanted to mention that experiences show a lot. On the next slide. So when I'm out there, oh, this is finally, I have a picture of my canopy and my chairs. It was not windy this day, and this was in Loop. Fortunately, it was a different site. People are driving, so it's kind of hard, to catch them. So hearing about experiences, I hear a lot, about survivance. These people, our people are very strong. They have a will to live. And we're still here too, after all these policies that were harmful to us. And one thing I like to highlight is, stuff that I hear a lot is the genetics moratorium on the Navajo genetic research studies. So at the past 100 years, there have been studies on Navajo genetics, and they were not widely shared, and some of these were not transparent to the people where the samples were taken from. And this always raises issues of transparency. But, talking with members, community members, they had mentioned that they are informed about cancer and reducing their exposures. And a few have even mentioned that they know that there is a connection between Navajo genetics that are associated with cancer and diabetes among Navajo population. So that, stimulates the question for how can genetic research inform cancer exposure and incidence? And that's still something that's evolving. It's been contextualized by Navajo genetics researchers and organized with Navajo cultural knowledge to reflect their worldview, the Nev worldview, and the fundamental law, which made their suggestion to include the OAs to be more valid. And this leads to the question again, like, do we begin to lift certain bans in genetics moratorium to advance Navajo genetic research to reduce these types of illnesses? Or, how can we begin to evolve using advanced technology and DNA research that will personalize cancer treatment and reduce disparities? So with that, I'd like to talk about our next steps in the next slide. So wrapping up the surveys and then doing the analysis, and then meeting with the Tuba City Regional to look at the medical record reviews and how those will inform a very specific incidence rate for Navajo adults in Western Agency. So that's very different than the cancer incidence rates that I've showed you. Those are from the 3 states and 6 counties where most of the Navajo people live. But this study will specifically make or try to formulate one incidence rate for only the Navajo Western Agency. In administering the healthcare surveys, the healthcare providers at the Tuba City Regional is also one of our most kind of like ending steps towards the end. This kind of wraps up everything. and reporting back to the communities. So with the information, Dr. Jonathan Credo, a Navajo medical doctor, has been around a lot of, you know, non-native medical doctors, and he found out that some of these doctors really don't ask about environmental exposures. So that's where the study came from, and Eleanor Fear, became involved and Zoe Lawrence, and she was one of the main pioneers of the study too, the having developed the survey. So with that, I just like to mention that we're strong people, we're very resilient. Although tahwejit ego, shea tahwejit ego, think for yourself and don't let anyone, try to bully you or influence you to create decisions that might be harmful to our people. And if you're a college student and you're listening, I just wanted to let you know that always believe in yourself and be true to yourself. And this is one thing that I had to really learn as I went through my journey, especially with setting boundaries and saying no. So, always remember yourself and where you come from to believe, to take advantage of every opportunity offered and to create solid relationships with your mentors, especially your cohort too, because they're going to be your foundation when you're having hard times, and there will be hard times. So, always remember, like my mentor, Dr. Jenny Ingram, she's like a second mom to me, and I been open with all, my experiences with her. So stuff like that. And after 10 years, I pretty much came full circle and am now working at the share with Dr. Ingram. So, it can happen for you too. It just really depends on how you believe in yourself and how you, reflect on our past and our history. And we're still going to be here and we'll never go away. So I just wanted to say that. And thank you. And don't forget to have fun too. Visit your elders. And that's it. Those are my reflections.
All right. Thank you so much, Tosh. And it looks like you have your email address there. So for any additional questions, feel free to copy that down. I think Chas will provide that in the chat as well. Um, but I can take over sharing again as we transition into the final bit of our webinar with just a couple minutes left. We have some time for some Q&A. So I'd love to jump into that. Maybe just a question or two, just to be mindful of people's time. But we especially encourage a question from our student participants first, and then we'll open it up to the broader audience after that. So if any students on the call have a question for Tosh, you can unmute or provide it in the chat. Okay, with no very quick fingers in the chat and no one unmuting, I will open it up to the broader audience now. If anyone has a question for Tosh, any comments or anything like that. Chastity has also provided our evaluation survey in the chat. We'd love to hear your feedback, especially if you have to leave us a little bit early here.
Hi,
Uh,
Tasha. I have
yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
hi, good morning, everybody. Um, I'm also from Black Mesa, but on the western, northern, or southern part of the Mesa near Refrakin. Chinle. And one of the things that I've tried to understand is like who are these people who are um, kind of reporting back to the communities about uranium mining, and um, I don't know the exact terminology, but to be able, mediate the remediation activities. Um, do you have any thoughts about how they're represented in the community? I feel like there are several different programs or people who do it, and I often feel like we're left out of the conversation. So although we kind of understand that they're possibly doing some good work, how do these programs work to do outreach, to introduce themselves to the community and talk about what they're doing? Because everybody is on the lookout for an unfamiliar or unrecognizable vehicle and why they're going on all the dirt roads that only we know. So
The studies usually are initiated by the community members. So like, for instance, Cameron and Coppermine, um, like I mentioned, there are informed people, not many, but there are a few, and usually those type of perspectives will initiate a conversation that way, and it'll get approved by the community with a chapter resolution, and then that's where they take their resolution to like the Ingram Lab, and then from there, usually grants are written, and that's where lots of approvals for fundings occur, and then depending on that, um, we usually go back out into the community, and um, Navajo researchers and other people expert in those fields will also be there. But it all depends. It all goes back to the community and how they initiate it and how they request it. And they will put exactly what they want done. And then from on the outside, the Congress is usually the mainly the organization or the department that's responsible for appropriations. So again, the Navajo leadership and community members and the government, how they pressure the congressional appropriations. That's where a lot of the monies are, they're appropriated, and they're set aside, and then people vote on it. And that's usually where, like IHS or the BIA, or the EPA, they get funding to take charge in those remedial efforts. If that does that make sense? But that
that
takes a
that really is helpful because yeah, not knowing what programs are a part of it, because I think I can recognize maybe the Navajo EPA and that sort, but I it's it's other programs like I'm not too familiar with the IHS and their environmental. I don't know how they participate or what program or department takes those efforts. So yeah, I think it is helpful to distinguish that you guys are doing work based on requests from community, and then there's this other side where the maybe government or other entities are working within institutions within Navajo Nation. And I think it's just my own like complaint is like, how do we know any of these people? How do we see them or recognize them when they come to our communities? And that's just one of my main complaints about it. Although I know it's an important, like all of these efforts related to uranium mining and remediation are important. It's just um, hard to determine whether the community understands what's going on, and if they feel safe around these programs who are coming. So
safety.
thank you a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. Safety is a big issue too, and yeah, a lot of partnerships between like the Navajo EPA, the Ned College, NAU, IHS, and things like that. So a lot of the partnerships they come together, and that's where a lot of the work is happening too.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your question, Kristen. Appreciated that. We are at the after the hours, so I'm gonna end the recording here. But I said earlier, Tosh will stay over just a little bit after the recording if there's any additional questions or any more one-on-one time that you'd like to have with her. But as we provided in the chat, there is an evaluation survey. We really appreciate your feedback on that. And we just appreciate your time and attendance today and sharing the space with us and learning more about Tasha's project. And Tosh, just want to thank you again for your presentation. We learned so much. It was awesome to hear a lot of the background work that's going on, and I think it was inspiring for our scholars to hear about such a transformative pathway they can take in cancer research. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our webinar today. Be on the lookout for that evaluation survey and the webinar recording. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.